Hello, I think we'll go ahead and begin. Welcome, everyone. We are very happy that Adam Edelen has come to join us, to speak to us today. Thank you. Adam H. Edelen was sworn in as Kentucky's 46th Auditor of Public Accounts on January 2nd, 2012. After successful careers as a high-ranking public official and business executive, Adam takes on one of the most important jobs in the Commonwealth, taxpayer watchdog. Born to a farm family in rural Kentucky, he learned the values of integrity, hard work, and common sense, and he has never forgotten them. Adam also is part of a new generation of leaders who are more focused on outcomes and honest and effective government than partisan politics. A nationally recognized leader in public service, Adam was named the Outstanding Young Kentuckian by the Kentucky Junior Chamber of Commerce in 2008, and one of the 10 Outstanding Young Americans by the U.S. Junior Chamber of Commerce later that year. The latter is arguably the oldest and most prestigious service award in the nation, and previous honorees include Presidents Kennedy, Nixon, Ford, and Clinton. Adam and his young twin sons make their home in Lexington. In addition to being a proud father, he is also an avid sportsman who loves Kentucky's one-of-a-kind natural beauty. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First, let me say good morning and thank you for what you do, because if it weren't for you doing what you do in the communities where you do it, I wouldn't be here today. Ladies and gentlemen, if you evaluated people and made a determination on where you thought they would end up based on where they started, nobody would have ever predicted that I would be holding high constitutional office in Kentucky, speaking to wonderful people like you. I was born in Meade County, Kentucky, and it's a great place, to a mother who was a couple months shy of her 17th birthday. My family are farmers. And if we evaluated people, again, based on where they came from, certainly nothing would have predicted that somebody who was born in the circumstances that I was born into would have the opportunity to make a large contribution to the people of Kentucky. But for me, the opportunity was a result of education. And at the core of my educational opportunity was access to libraries. I was a Meade County bookmobile kid. I learned early on, thank you. Because libraries are important not just because they're key to educating children and educating all those who wish to garner knowledge. They're important because they democratize education. You know, let's not lose sight of the fact that in an era in which our young people are going to be called and hopefully prepared to compete with young people from China and India, places where for so long your access to education determined how you would be able to compete, what you were able to learn in a global economy. The fact is that libraries have been democratizing education, have been making location and geography irrelevant for a very long period of time. One of my favorite photos, it hung in my office when I was the governor's chief of staff. When I get around to decorating in my own office, it will go back up in the state auditor's office. If you haven't read the paper, it's been a busy 100 days for me between former commissioners of agriculture, indigent care funds in Louisville, and managed care companies who don't think we ought to pay doctors. I have had a whole lot to do. But one of the pictures that I'm so very proud of, hello Judge, good to see you. Let me introduce your Warren County Judge, Mike Buchanan, who had a lot to do with this facility being built, and who I can give you the speech that Mike always gives out-of-towners, and that is, welcome to Bowling Green, Warren County. It's a fabulous place. We hope that you'll spend a lot of money while you're here. Is that good? Thanks. That's good. See you. And Mike's a Republican. He's a good friend of mine. So hope springs eternal that there can be more people who have good bipartisan working relationships like we have, Mike. But I'm going to get back to my speech now.
Welcome to Bowling Green.
Yeah, see you, buddy. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. You're working on it. But there's a famous black and white picture taken in Breathitt County in the 1940s, and you know what I'm talking about that. It's a picture of the old bookmobile. And there are children who are clearly not from wealthy families, who are sitting on the running board, reading books to each other, who are propped up about it. Folks, that is Kentucky's future. To me, if I had to, in one illustration, fundamentally represent my view of what government ought to do, it is that painting. It's that picture. Because if our fundamental responsibility is to prepare our people to compete in a global economy, and that's something we've got to do. It's about feeding intellect. It's about making sure young people and all those who are curious have access to knowledge, who have access to the books on your shelves or the technologies that you now have in your libraries. They're far different than the libraries that I grew up going to, but the mission is now more important than ever because Kentucky's long-term challenges are based on our ability to compete in a global economy, which is totally married to developing young people who have the knowledge base to be able to do that. So let me first begin my remarks with applauding you for the very good and extraordinarily important work that you do, because an awful lot hangs in the balance. You know, I was encouraged to run for a lot of different things. You know, Adam, run for this office, you'll make less enemies. You know, run for this office, there's not a lot to do. Why in the world do you want to be state auditor? Well, I ran hard to be state auditor, and I'll share with you some stories from the campaign trail. But I ran hard to be state auditor because in an era in which families are literally gathered around kitchen tables, when are trying to figure out how to send their sons or daughters to college, when school boards and library boards are making critical decisions about how we meet our mission in an era of diminished resources, now more than ever, it's important that we have a taxpayer watchdog who knows that every dollar lost to waste, inefficiency, or public corruption is a dollar that we can't invest in our people. And we've got to be candid enough to look in the mirror and appreciate the beauty and the warts and all. And I'm going to be candid. We live in a state that's a poor state. A poor state cannot afford inefficient or corrupt government. And I have the opportunity as state auditor to fight every day the twin challenges that have historically held Kentucky back. You know, folks, it isn't rocket science. The two challenges that we face are, one, a corrupt political culture that for too long has robbed our people of a government that is as good as they are. The second is a scarcity of resources in which to invest in our people. Educating a kid isn't something that can be done on the cheap. Making sure that our people who need quality health care isn't something that can be done on the cheap. Making sure that our senior population, the greatest generation, who has earned the right to age with dignity on the battlefields and factories and farms of this world, is not something that can be done cheaply. And in an era in which our families are struggling, in which people are working hard to keep their job just to be able to maintain where they are, it's important that we have efficient and effective government at every level. And the opportunity to fight every day for that future, to fight to make sure that we've got the best government, that we're able to make sure that we're able to continue to make investments in our people, is something that I'm extraordinarily honored to have the opportunity to do. Now, I've been in office about 102 days, but who's counting? A little over 100 days. In that period, we have delved in significant ways trying to address those key areas. You know, when we have a managed care system that we've introduced to our Medicaid population in Kentucky that has resulted in not enough of our providers being able to keep their doors open. You live in a time in which doctors and dentists and eye doctors and all sorts of providers to our Medicaid population are having to open or exhaust lines of credit to keep their doors open because they haven't been paid by these insurance companies. By the way, the insurance companies are supposed to pay these claims with our tax dollars. That's a real problem. So I was aggressive about dealing with that. We threatened to subpoena the billing records of these managed care companies. We found out that while they had drawn $750 million from our pockets, they had only paid $400 million to our Medicaid providers, and as a result, that social safety net that we depend upon to serve our most vulnerable was beginning to fray. That's not acceptable. Kentucky deserves better. When we have to make sure that we're pursuing those in public office who haven't met their obligation to the taxpayers to do the right things, we're there. And right now we're concluding a very important investigation into the former Commissioner of Agriculture's administration in the Department of Agriculture, because agriculture is our largest contributor to our Kentucky economy. And the people of Kentucky deserve a taxpayer-funded organization that is charged with promoting agriculture and serving as a watchdog for us in so many different areas, ranging from carnival rides to ensuring that when you pay for a gallon of gas at the pump, that you indeed get a gallon of gas. Folks, these are important functions. So we're going to continue on. We're in the Indigent Care Fund in Louisville, making sure that the poor folks in our most populated city are getting the insurance, getting the care that they've been paid for by the taxpayers to get. That's important. But it's about making sure that we in Kentucky create a culture not just of good government, but of excellence. And I think that's something that in large measure, so many organizations, such as the ones represented by yourself, have made enormous contributions towards in the past, and I know you'll continue to do that in the future. One of the things that we're going to address in the coming weeks are the issue of special taxing districts. Many of you are special taxing districts, and I want to talk to you a minute, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here because the good actors, the people who do fine work are the folks who come to conferences like this, and I want to make sure that we reach all of the people who are in these areas, because it's important to note again that in a time that is largely defined by economic scarcity, you are a taxpayer steward. You know, whether you run a library board or an airport board or you're an employee of a sanitation district, folks, there just aren't the tax dollars to go around that there always have been. And an ounce of prevention, as I learned back home in Flaherty, is always worth a pound of cure. And making sure that on the front end, the decisions that you make as part of your strategic and tactical decision-making process needs to keep in mind, it needs to have an important focus on your mission, but you also need to demonstrate a real sensitivity to the taxpayers who fund your operation. Because folks, people are looking around and they don't have the money that they used to have, and they're working hard just to kind of make ends meet. And they're looking at their neighbors, and they're looking at the governments that are closest to them, particularly local governments, and they're making a real keen evaluation about whether they're getting a bang for their buck. And I know that we have an excellent library system in Kentucky, and I know you're struggling with the same issues of resources that everyone else is struggling with. But because your mission is so important, because you have the education, because you have a primary education responsibility, anytime someone who is a bad actor, and we've learned that it takes very few apples to ruin the whole batch, your mission is so important that you have to be sensitive to doing everything totally above board. Not just providing good ethical government, but for being a model for good government in your community. Because when you have the responsibility for promoting an education mission, this is, in my view, the most important fundamental operation of government. You know, not that I would encourage the sanitation districts to get out and do the wrong thing. Good Lord knows a lot of them have. But when you're trying to compete in a global economy, the issue of sanitation is not as important as the issue of education. And I want you to understand that you have an important tactical responsibility to the people you serve to provide great programming, to make sure that we have all the tools that our young people and our curious need to further develop their intellect. But you also have a moral responsibility, because not every function of government is created equally. I myself am in public life because of the issue of education. You know, somebody who was born in the background that I was born to, my only way to move forward was that I had a great family that taught me good values and insisted that I do my homework. And I had access to a great library system, access to good schools. But the people who are in the business of providing those sorts of services that both feed the intellect and feed the soul are frankly more important than a lot of these other areas we've got in government. So I want to stress to you how important it is, given the importance of your mission, that in the daily administration of your organizations, that you have to get it right. Because if you don't, whether it be through someone doing the wrong thing or whether it be through just a careless mistake, those mistakes can undermine what should be the primary focus of Kentucky, and that's educating our people. So that's the tough love message of this, is that what you do is extraordinarily important. It's important to the future of Kentucky. It's important, again, to feeding both the intellect and the soul. It's one that you have an increased responsibility to make sure we get it right. You know, when a sanitation district screws up, when an airport board, goodness like the one we had in Lexington, spends taxpayer dollars on pornography and everything else you can imagine. People get outraged, but at the end of the day, they say, well, that's what we expect. When it goes to the heart of such an important public mission as in libraries or education, it threatens to really set us back. So I know you're committed to doing the right thing. I know you know how important what you do is. And I want to communicate to you that I know how important what you do is. Again, I'm not sure I'd be standing here if it weren't for folks like you making sure that education and resources and books are available to everybody. I certainly benefited from that. Now, on a lighter note, I love the campaign you have where you take celebrities and lesser-known celebrities like me, politicians, and you put a book in front of us, and you take the picture and you hang it in the Capitol or your local libraries. I'm a voracious reader. It is, other than being outside, my favorite and most active hobby is reading, and I'm a big reader of biographies. And the most difficult question I have been asked as the state auditor is, Adam, we need you to come over to the Paul Sawyer Library, and we need you to bring one of your favorite books to have your picture made. So I'm very, very much proud of my library. I've got almost 1,000 books in my library, and I'm looking through, and I said, well, there's one on Alexander Hamilton. That's one of my favorites, and the books that Robert Caro wrote about Lyndon Johnson are some of my favorites. Of course, there's so many great books about our founding fathers. Which one will I pick? Well, I have a sense of humor that has maybe not been so funny to some of the folks in the legislature or some of the lobbyists who are fighting my efforts to bring reform to Kentucky. I chose the book written about a young group of parliamentary leaders in England who helped bring an old man named Winston Churchill back to power. And if you'll look in this poster, if you haven't seen it, there is your very young state auditor who is making some noise, I guess some good and bad, holding up a book entitled Troublesome Young Men. I'm glad you think it's funny. I thought it was awfully funny. Unfortunately, I think everybody got the joke. I wasn't as slick as I thought I was, but that's how important books have been to me. I'm a constant reader, and more importantly, my 6-year-old twin sons are constant readers. And you can certainly, but people I don't think outside our profession who don't share our passion perhaps maybe don't fully grasp how important it is to make sure that young people are able to read. I've read that the most comprehensive and effective model for projecting the number of future prison cells that need to be built is a metric based on the number of third graders who are reading at grade level. On one side, we can be depressed by that, but I happen to celebrate it, because if you look at that, you find causality, and I think it's there. What it expresses is that if we invest in our young people, if we make sure that they are given every ability to compete, if we make sure that they're able to read at third grade, what it means is they're not going to be drags on society. Folks, it is just that simple. And for a state that for so long has been punished by its geography, been punished by an economy that's been focused on the extraction and exportation of resources, our ability to invest in our people is our best opportunity to move Kentucky forward. The work ethic of our people, the values that they hold dear, their commitment to one another is extraordinary. The missing ingredient is making sure that we have a government that runs leanly, efficiently, effectively, and honestly, and is able to make strong investments in our people. And we are at our best in Kentucky when we are our boldest. There are certainly people who can dispute, who may not like our education reform efforts that have happened in Kentucky over the last 20 years. But I would point out to you that the numbers speak for themselves. My generation of Kentuckians, frankly, was the last to be educated under the Thank God for Mississippi model. Now think about that. Think about that. I said, well, things aren't so great here. We're maybe not doing what we need to do. But thank God for Mississippi or Arkansas or wherever else. Well, that's not where I want to be compared. That's not how you want to be compared. 20 years ago, we got our act together, and we did the right thing. And now you look at the metrics, we're 32nd, 31st now in educational attainment for this generation that's been educated under the new system. Folks, that's real progress. And while you can't put "we're 31 and proud of it" on a bumper sticker, what it does reflect is the greatest growth and education of a citizenry over the last 20 years for any other state in the country except for North Carolina. That's where the company that I want to be in. That's the company that Kentuckians want to be in. So we have got to be unapologetic about promoting education. We have got to be unapologetic about making sure that our libraries are some of the best in America and in the world. And we've got to be unapologetic and unrelenting in our commitment to making sure that a kid born in Kentucky has the opportunity to compete on a global scale, but most importantly has the opportunity to realize the American dream in the communities that they came up in. That's what this is all about. You know, Happy Chandler once said he never met a Kentuckian who wasn't coming home. And there's a lot of truth to that. We love where we come from. You don't have to go very far to look around the communities and see the real pride that we've got. You know, I've been to a lot of communities that frankly don't have two nickels to rub together, but they've got a great library. And isn't a library a wonderful reflection of a community's values? It really is, and it's something that I think we can all be proud of. But at the end of the day, we've got to double down our efforts and make sure we're doing the right thing. And I'm proud to be part of that effort. I'm proud to be the taxpayer watchdog. Frankly, I would have told you 2 months ago that it was the second best job in state government. But the governor heard me make that comment publicly, and he corrected me. He said, "Son, I assure you, you've got the best job in state government." But these are the times that define us. And for those of you who, like I am, are a student of history, we can take comfort in history. You know, my grandfather's generation, who was born and raised on that farm outside of Flaherty in Meade County, Kentucky, first time he left the farm was to go, in the words of Woodrow Wilson, to make the world safe for democracy. He served overseas in a very important war. He came back. He married my grandmother, and they raised a wonderful family on that farm. And they, like so many of their others in their generation, did the heavy lifting and built America into what it is. And they've properly earned the definition, the description as the greatest generation. Well, I'm here to tell you that we are living in interesting, critical times like that. And how we behave, the strategic decisions we make about what to fund, what not to fund, what kind of government we're going to run, whether we continue to meet our obligation to one another is going to define us for a generation. And 40 or 50 years from now, when our children and grandchildren find themselves in the libraries that you have built, and they reach to the shelf, or probably more likely pull out a CD-ROM and plug it into a handheld device that we haven't even dreamed up yet, I want them to read in whatever history lesson they're able to get that our generation got it right when we most needed to. That we made the important decisions to continue to invest in our future, even when times were tough, that we were able to make sure that we understand and we met our obligation to each other as members of civil society. Folks, that's the history that I want written of my generation of leaders and this generation of Kentuckians. Because if we get it right, if we do the right thing, if we're bold in the right areas, if we make the right decisions, if we meet the moral and personal obligations that we have been entrusted with meeting to our people, we can build the kind of communities that we want to build. We can build the kind of Kentucky we want to showcase to the world. And in doing so, we can turn this country around. I really believe that. This is about people coming together in common voice and common purpose and doing the right thing. Now, I'm going to end with a few stories from the campaign trail because I know you're librarians and you love to collect anecdotes. And I think you give the best demonstration of how you'll govern by the way you campaign. You know, when I'm running for state auditor, which had become a pretty high-profile position, particularly under our former auditor, Crit Llewellyn, and I said, well, this is my opportunity as a young man to go out and campaign around the state and meet lots of interesting people. And one of the things that I found is that the knowledge and wisdom and values that we want more of in Frankfort are found in the city centers and the small communities around Kentucky. And I'm going to showcase two in particular. If you look at a map of the state and you look at the extreme western corner beyond the Purchase, you're going to find a little area that is a circle. It's about 5,000 acres that is separated from the rest of Kentucky by the Mississippi River and about 40 minutes of Tennessee. It's called the New Madrid Bend. And 17 people live there, and I have shaken hands with every single one of them. It's a fascinating area. It's shaped like your thumb, and it's essentially an isthmus that the Mississippi River circles around. As a matter of fact, one of the families there was telling me that during the Civil War, when the Union frigates were going downriver for the siege at Vicksburg, that the Confederates who were there, and they made it clear that they were all Confederates, would be on one side with their mules, and they would shell those frigates, and then after the frigates passed, they would ride all the way across to the other side and shoot at them again, which I think is an excellent example of the spirit of Kentucky. And I met a lady there named Daisy Wilson who had lived in the Bend for 70 years. And I said, ma'am, I'm here. I've come an awful long way, 40 minutes through Tennessee to get here. And I think that if you're willing to go vote, I'm sure here to ask for your vote. I've come a long way. Can I have it? And she said, absolutely, young man, you can have it. By the way, I think you're the first Kentucky politician to campaign here since Happy Chandler. And then she looked at me and she said, have you ever met him? And I said, no, ma'am, but I've read about him in books. For those of you who live on the other end of the state, you might be familiar with the community of Paw Paw, which is in the most extreme eastern area of Pike County. It's a geographical oddity in that you have to drive through Buchanan County, Virginia, twice to get there. And I knocked on a door and met another elderly woman who had been in Paw Paw for a long time. And I said, ma'am, I have come all the way from Lexington to ask you for your vote. I'm in the business of asking for your vote, and I really would like it. And she said, well, son, you've got it, but while I've got you here, I'm in the business of selling quilts and pickled beets. $55 later, I had a quilt and a jar of pickled beets. The point being that if you want to represent Kentucky, you have to represent all Kentuckians. And if you want to represent the people who live in your communities, you've got to fight and represent all of them. That means the kid from the other side of the tracks who may need help getting to the library so they can check out a book. It may mean making sure that the elderly folks who can't see like they used to have Braille books or the big print books. It may mean making sure that all those who are somewhere in between have the resources they need to better themselves. You know, I once was told that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And for those of us in this room who have the opportunity, who are entrusted to varying degrees to represent and fight for the public, is there anything better than having the job of making sure the resources and programming is in place for people to improve themselves? I mean, think about that. Think about how awesome your responsibility is. Think about how rewarding, although not financially, how rewarding the work you do is. Folks, in this time and place when the world has gotten so cynical, and it's all about chasing the buck, it's great to be with people who are in a place who are feeding the mind and feeding the soul, and who have the opportunity every day to make Kentucky and your communities a better place. At the end of the day, who could ask for more? Folks, I appreciate you being here very much. Beyond that, I appreciate what you do for regular rank-and-file Kentuckians every day. And my promise is that I will continue to be a taxpayer watchdog to make sure that we have the resources to invest in those of you who make sure that we have everything in place for people who want to invest in themselves. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions. Yes, sir.
I have one question and one statement. I'll do the statement first. There's actually a Kentucky bookmobile that goes and visits those people in the New Madrid Bend. It goes into Tennessee,
it's
comes
amazing.
back, and brings them books.
I think that says a lot that the library can get there, but the police aren't able to. That's a very big deal. The handful of kids who live in the Bend, again, there are only 17 people there, but the handful of kids who live in the Bend go to school in Tennessee, and the state of Kentucky reimburses the state of Tennessee for their education. Let me throw one little bit of information out. This drove me crazy. I'm not sure I should say this on videotape, but I'm going to anyway. So you go into the Bend after driving through Tennessee for 40 minutes. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And there is a sign that says you are leaving Tennessee. Now that's just really poor form, right? I mean, come on, you're leaving Tennessee. So when we left the Bend, I called an old contact I had at the district transportation office down there, who I believe thought that I was still the governor's chief of staff. Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't disabuse him of that notion. I did, however, ask the question, do you have any of those Welcome to Kentucky signs laying around? He said, we got a whole warehouse full of them. I said, well, I think it would be a good idea if you went and put one out. And the next day they did. And if you ever go down the New Madrid Bend, you will see a sign that says, "Welcome to Kentucky." And that's what government should all be all about. Yes, sir. So I'm sorry to, it's a topic I love to talk about, so I apologize.
I took a picture of that sign about 3 weeks ago. I was fishing at Reelfoot. We went up there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I got a picture of your welcome to Kentucky.
I'm really proud of it. You know, sometimes we're able to accomplish things before we get into office, and that was one of them. So anyway, go ahead with your question.
And then the other part of that was just that a bookmobile also goes into Virginia and comes back to Kentucky. Kentucky bookmobile does that. But my question is that your predecessor, Chris Wellen, produced a wonderful set of guidelines for nonprofits and government agencies. Are you planning to look during your time in office to produce a similar sort of?
We are, particularly in the area of education, because what we have found and what you're speaking of is the 32 recommendations for effective board governance. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend you do it, because while it's got the very official title of the 32 recommendations for effective board governance, its subtitle ought to be entitled, or How to Stay Out of Trouble with the State Auditor. You can get it on my website, which is ky.auditor.gov. It's there right on the panel. I would make sure that not only you and all your staff have read it, but your boards have read it as well. It's very important. I ran for office. One of the things I talked about was I wanted to be an auditor that focused on the big ticket items that reflect the people of Kentucky's largest contribution as taxpayers. And those primarily are education and social services, primarily Medicaid. And you've seen my presence in Medicaid, which will be vigilant. We have formed a unit called the Medicaid Accountability and Transparency Unit, which does nothing but focus on the $6 billion program. $500 million a month is what Kentucky spends, state and federal money. $500 million a month is what we pay for health care for our most vulnerable. And while I am passionate about making sure our most vulnerable have that resource, you and I as taxpayers have a right to know that that program is run as efficiently and effectively as it possibly can. So we're going to be constantly present in the area of Medicaid. In the coming weeks, you will see us expand our operation into education. And our hope is that we're going to catch some people doing the right thing and use that as a model for effective governance. And certainly we will unfortunately catch some people who aren't doing the right thing, and we'll make sure that they're held to account. But the net result will be that we hope to produce by the end of the year a set of guidelines for effective school board governance. That we have effective, because the issues can be totally different between a school board and a library board, or perhaps a not-for-profit board that is supported by the public.
Thank you.
Check out the website. We're very proud of it. The old website was absolutely dreadful. It had like a waterfall hologram in the background, and it looked like something out of the 70s, which is a novel approach because we didn't have websites in the 70s. But we managed to pull it off. If you'll go look at our new website, which was launched, my chief of staff, by the way, Tom Bennett, is with me today. Tom, when did we rolled that out Monday or Tuesday? We're really proud of this, and it has a feature that I think is rather extraordinary that I hope you never have to use, but if you do need to use it, it's there. We have a section of our website that allows whistleblowers to communicate to the state auditor anonymously if they choose, or with their contact information, encrypted information about wrongdoings or inefficiencies that we need to track down. And that's a very important tool to have, because my vision for the auditor's office is for Kentucky to have the most modern, aggressive, independent taxpayer watchdog in the country. Adopting this new technology, frankly staying current with using technology to stay current with the people who break the law is really an important element to being able to implement that vision. So be sure to check out our website. And I also want to make you aware of our tip line that we have. It's a hotline, 800-KY-ALERT, which enables people to do the similar thing. When you are charged with producing 600 audits a year by statute, when you have 130 employees, the exact same number that you had 6 or 7 years ago, we rely on the public to engage as citizen auditors to help us in the business of being able to ferret out corruption or inefficiency. So that's very important, and I want to make you aware of that as well. But all that information is available to you on our really outstanding website that we're really proud of. Yes, ma'am.
Well, this is more of a request
Sure.
or an idea. So we have a lot of taxpayer watchdog groups that are springing up and seem to be more active now than I have witnessed. And all of them, when they come to me, for example, or my board, predicate that by saying we support the library, we love the library, but we want to know that exactly some of the things that you're saying, that you're spending our money responsibly. So as you, playing off of what JC was saying, as you issue these sorts of things that will help us to be better about that as organizations that are taxpayer supported, if there's some way of saying that there was, like, not a certificate, but some kind of a thing that said, yes, you guys are compliant, you know, this library is STAR compliant or whatever, and has met all of these things, because I think that would give people a sense that they have, all they can do is trust us that we're doing it. But if somebody outside of us is saying that we're doing it, you know what I mean?
What's your name? No.
It's Ruthie Maslin from Madison County.
That's great. Ruthie, the answer I'm going to give is going to lead you, all your friends, to believe that you're a plant. And I promise she's not. Folks, I'm going to announce this effort probably within the next 6 weeks, and I'm going to give you a taste of this. There are about 1,500 special taxing districts in Kentucky. 1,500. We don't even know who's compliant and who's not. And the net result is that the good actors get lumped in with the bad. And we have to have a system in Kentucky that separates, as they say back home, the wheat from the chaff. And I'm going to make sure that we're able to do that. Now, this is a mammoth undertaking. I want you to know that again, you heard me say we perform 600 statutorily required audits a year. That's your local governments and every agency of state government every year. I don't have the ability or the resources, although I have plenty of desire, to come in and audit all 15 or 1,600 of these special taxing districts. But what we hope to have the ability to do is to determine who's compliant and who isn't, to let the people know, using modern technology, who is being a good steward of their tax dollars and who isn't. And that will be one of the primary, I'm really excited that you brought that up. I can't give much away more than that, other than to tell you, be paying close attention to your newspaper and TV by the end of May. The team that we have assembled is one that has national talent. We're going to be, I believe, the first state in the country to do what we're about to do, and we're doing it primarily because of the exact reason that you mentioned. And that is, again, in a time in which tax dollars are scarce, those who are doing a good job shouldn't be lumped in with those who aren't. And we're going to draw a really strong distinction. I'm excited. But Ruthie, I promise everybody she's not a plant. And my press secretary is going to go crazy that I mentioned that here. But anyway, it's good. She's good.
Sorry. First, have you seen the new library in Meade County?
I have.
Oh,
absolutely.
great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well,
And the book won't be on next week.
That's wonderful. You need to get one of those Adam Edelen library read posters up there. My relatives, who populate about 2/3 of the county, will definitely come out. You know, in the last election, I got numbers in my home county like Fidel Castro gets in Cuba when he runs for president. It was great. If my grandmother were still alive, I think she'd try to find the 10 people there who didn't vote for me.
Well, send us one.
Yeah, we will. We will. Go ahead.
well, up the hall, I don't know if you know or not, we have 88 trustees who are taking trustee training all day today.
Right.
And we're starting a trustee certification program. But you know, those 5 folks in every county work hard under very difficult circumstances. Operating library is very complex.
Yes, sir.
What do you suggest generally for them that they need to be doing?
That's a great question. The first answer is to make sure you get all the training from your professional association like this one. The second is to make sure that you always keep in mind your mission, what your focus is, which is serving people, and to understand that more people are observing your administration than you could ever imagine. I mean, we all have newspapers and media outlets who are frankly taking on important watchdog responsibilities. So making sure you're vigilant about continuing to do the right thing in the right manner is extraordinarily important. The other thing I would point to is that, and folks, this is probably not the most political thing to say, but I'm going to hit you right between the eyes with it. Make sure your boards are populated by people who bring something to the table rather than just have been on the right side of a political election. You are running large enterprises. You have a financial operation, you have a programmatic operation, you have inventory, you have facilities. You need to make sure that your board reflect the best and the brightest of your community who are genuinely committed to your mission. And if that means avoiding the political class, then that's what you got to do. But you need workers, you need people who are workhorses rather than show horses. But I cannot stress how important it is to have effective board governance, because even an outstanding, properly motivated executive running any institution can go the wrong way if there's not a strong board there. So making sure that the board is of the caliber of some of the people running these organizations, I think, is extraordinarily important. Yes, sir.
Jumping off of that, the present bill that was introduced this last cycle, Senate Bill 49, would actually go quite against that. Getting that apolitical board in charge of the library. That bill put the county executive directly in charge of appointing the board without the board's intervention or input. And we don't think that that's effective, because you can't necessarily get people who are invested in the future of the library, but you will definitely get people who are beholden to the current elected.
Yeah, the people who are on who are populating any boards, first loyalty ought to be to the mission of the organization they're on. That's extraordinarily important. Now, that's not to say that there aren't a lot of public officials who would keep the library top of mind. I know, certainly there are other examples. I've lived in Lexington since I went to UK. It seems like every mayor at some point tries to clear the monies that have accumulated because of the tax, and they get slapped, and the courts never rule in their favor. But making sure you have people who are properly motivated, and that's not to say that they ought to be apolitical. I mean, there are folks. I'm a strong believer that those of us in the education space who believe in making sure that we've got the world-class system of improvement in place, we have an obligation to be involved in politics, I think. But I think what we need on our boards and what we need in public life, who are folks who believe that politics are a means to an end rather than the end itself.
I agree that we have to be involved in politics, but libraries, apolitical. We're just trying to get you involved and informed so that you can go out and make your own.
Exactly right.
Whether you're a Bush or an Obama supporter makes no difference. An RRD.
And making sure that communities have resources for people who want to read, surely to goodness, ought not to be a partisan issue.
Right.
Yeah. There are plenty of things to fight over, but making sure kids have books, I hope that isn't controversial. Unbelievable. When knowledge becomes a political issue, folks, we're in deep, deep trouble. Anybody else have any questions?
I just say one
Yeah.
more thing.
Sure. Absolutely.
I actually had a guy say to me, and this is in a public meeting, I don't know, when did libraries get into the business of educating people? Why are you doing that? That was an honest statement.
What happened with Senate Bill 49? What happened with Senate Bill 49?
Today will tell the tale. So
Yeah.
today's the last day of the session, so if the gavel hits and nothing happens, that would be great.
It's currently in committee, correct?
It's currently in committee, and it was taken off out of the committee, heard on the House floor, and one reading, and that's where it stands right
Then it can't get its third reading.
now. Hopefully.
Looks like you want it. No, they would really have to monkey with.
They have to suspend all.
Oh, next year. Yeah. You can only win these things one session at a time, unfortunately. It's amazing to me that a good idea that's unsuccessful can disappear forever. But bad ideas, you can only beat them from one session to the other. It's unfortunate. So, does anyone else have any other questions or comments or advice? Look, you can reach me via email. You can get me at adam.edelen@ky.gov. You can get any member of my staff, Tom included, via the website. We're serious about engaging the public. Our mission is too broad. Our resources are too finite to accomplish what we want to accomplish without having the broad-based support of the people of Kentucky. And I'd love to start with the librarians and the librarians. Thank you very much.
Thank you.